Hello world and welcome back to my YouTube channel. For those who don't know who I am, my name is James Watling. I am a music student at the University of Hertfordshire, currently finishing off my Masters. And in this video series I'm going to be taking you through the processes of me writing my first musical as part of my dissertation. So it's crunch time now, we've got less than 24 hours left to finish this project and it's going really well, at a really good pace. In this vlog I'm actually going to walk you through some of the really interesting things I did when mixing this project, and I'm going to take you through a live mastering that same song and show you some of the stuff I did to master. I've actually already, at this moment, I've mastered already 3 songs and I'm going to do this 4th one with you. And yeah, it's going really well. Once I've done with all the mastering, I'll be able to finish off the write-up and hand it in, hopefully by tonight. Well, it's due in tomorrow 12, so it's going to have to be tonight. And yeah, so what is mixing and mastering? So mixing is the process of making everything in the song blend together properly. So we do that through EQ, through compression, through multiple other things. It's basically about making the song sound as best as it possibly can. The mastering process is about making the song sound as loud as it can. And that isn't loud in terms of the volume knob that you turn up and down on Spotify. That is to do with the dynamic range. There's also a numerical value that we use called the LUFS, which is to do with dynamic range in regards to EQ, and that's kind of what we do. We want to make it as loud as possible and make it distributable across multiple platforms. And so yeah, let's get started. We'll start with the mixing stuff, and then I'm actually going to record me mastering it now, and then there'll be a sort of time jump going on. So I'll see you soon. So let's start off going through one of my mixes. This here is the mix for No Strings on Me, which is the 4th song in the musical. I've shown you it a few times before. The first 2 things you could probably notice is, one, it is very colourful. This is just something that I didn't used to do, and actually was some advice a lecturer gave me a while ago to just sort of colour code things so you can more clearly see where things are. I don't really do it in the production process, but I do it in the mixing process. The second thing you can notice is that it doesn't seem too many instruments. I've actually grouped up instruments into separate sections, so the drums, the bass, the strings, the piano, the guitars, the ensemble and the vocals, just so I can control singular instruments together. When you expand it, that changes, so it's no problem at all, and I can fine-tune things separately. So I'm not going to go through minutiae details, I'm just going to go through broad details of what I did mixing this song, kind of the same techniques I used across the board. So here is my mixer. This is my Logic Pro mixer. That's all the plugins that are on the buses and everything, and then if I expand them out into the singular instruments, this is going to be a lot, and there we go. So that's everything there. So we've got my reverb and delay buses, there's my drums in pink and purple, then again my bass is here, my strings, my pianos, my guitars, my ensembles, and finally my lead vocals. So you'll notice there's a couple of plugins I use. I typically split my time between stock plugins and plugins by iZotope, specifically their Neutron range, albeit I have used Nectar a few times. I also have a couple of independent plugins, stuff like Oak Sounds Soothe, which is really useful. And that's often just, I use them typically. Sometimes I'll use the Neutron compressor because it's a little more intuitive, whereas other times I use the Logic stock because it can be distorted and other things that can be really helpful. And sometimes I might use, especially on vocals, and I'll show you in a moment, I might use both as I go. So yeah, that is just the basic mixer. There's nothing overly special. There was a couple of things that I did want to show. So everything here in yellow, this is all of my reverbs, my delays, all my buses. There is a distortion as well. And what I've got here, so I've got a mono reverb, that's from my vocal. I've then got a slightly larger one and a delay, both for my vocal. I've got a parallel distortion for my drums, a large room with small delay, which looks a bit like this. This is Crystalline. This is one of the independent plugins, and this is, yeah, a very big room, but the actual delay is really tiny. I find it really helpful for the bass sometimes. Then we've got a theatre, a chamber, which isn't actually in use in this song, but is in use in one of the other songs, and then a couple of smaller plates here. That's just how I like to sort of have a couple of mix buses that are used across all the instruments, and a couple, especially with regards to vocals, that are just tuned specifically for vocals. So yeah, that's what I've done with that. I'm going to walk you through a little bit, not going to really show the minutiae of what I did, but just how I mix the vocals. So here, my vocal, so just for both my vocals are almost the same. There's some volume changes and some other things because they do get louder as the song goes on. But the basic here is I have my EQ, which is just a filter EQ, my distortion, which is just the Neutron 4 exciter. I've got soothe here, which is just helping support take away some of the resonance. First compressor, which is the stock. Another EQ, which is a little bit of, I believe, yeah, just a little bit of shaping. Then a de-esser and another compressor. And that goes into the bus, which starts with a much tighter compressor. So we have 3 compressors on the vocals in total. Another soothe, and then this EQ. So I'm going to explain the specifics of this EQ because it was a really big epiphany when mixing this that actually spread to not just these 5 mixes but every mix I've ever done. So I'll come back to that in a moment. That then goes through the mono vox and the vox delay, and the vocal at the beginning is going through a slightly larger reverb. So that's my vocal channel strip. The next thing then is I'll go through this really interesting experience with this EQ. So this EQ, as you can see, is a boost in the present, so around 4,500. I think one of my other songs it's 4,250. It does slightly change, and a cut in the 400-ish hertz. Now, so it's really hot today, and I turn my fan on. You'll only hear that. So with the vocals, you want them to be pulled really far forward. So you want to pull them in the presence mix, which is sort of between 3 and 8K. It does change per song. The issue there, however, is when you put too much of that in, this sort of area here, this 200 to 700, starts to become really muddy and dirty, and it really ruins the mix. I didn't notice this until it's an issue that all my mixes I've had in the past. And then I was sitting here and I was saying, oh, my vocal feels like it's being swallowed. It's obviously the most obvious instrument. Feels like it's being swallowed. Let me keep pulling it forward. The more forward I pulled it, the dirtier and the muddier the mix is. And actually, in the end, I said, okay, let's work and try and cut this 400. And it's cut on every not that one. It's cut on almost every single instrument. On the guitars, on the piano, on the strings, on the bass much harder, I believe, hold on, and then on the drums as well, there. And in order to offset the massive increase in presence I've added to the vocal and the ensemble, I've made huge cuts to that here on all the other instruments to pull them to the back and pull them forward. By comparison, the vocals are even further forward. Now, as an extension to that, I found out about this technique, and this plus the cutting at 400 and boosting at about 4,250 was the big holy grail epiphany of this project for me, because it fixed the big issue I had with my mixes, which was that my vocals were being swallowed and it sounded really dirty and muddy. Now, all this boosting and cutting really helped the mixes, but the vocals still sounded a bit too loud, not too far forward, but too loud. And my lecturer told me about this idea ages ago, and I completely forgot about it until today, till I started mixing this, to compress on a multi-compressor on the mix bus between 3 and 8K, and this is where the vocal primarily sits, but other instruments sit there as well. And what this does, it's going to pull the vocal slightly back, but also pull all the instruments that are in the way of the vocal slightly back as well, so you start to have the vocal come forward and everything else move backwards, and it sounds so good. It sounds like a lot of your favourite pop records. So that was a huge epiphany for me. Finally then, my mix bus is really basic. I've got that boost and cut here as well, so I've probably cut a total of about 10-15 dB in 400 and boosted quite a bit, 4,250. I've got another soothe. This one is a slightly harsher one, so this will take out a lot of really nasty frequencies. I then got this compressor I just told you about, a mix bus compressor, which is the API 2500 by Waves, and then my tonal balance control, which I'll explain about in the mastering. So yeah, that is some of the stuff I did mixing this project. And yeah, it's been really exciting. This is a great mix, I'm really happy with it. And next I'm going to speak about the mastering stage. So here you can see my Logic file for the master for No Strings on Me. So I've bounced this out from the mix I showed you earlier, and I've placed it in here so I can master it separately from the mix, so I can have better CPU usage, etc. Also, you'll see here is this track here. This is one of my reference tracks. This is I Say No from Heathers the Musical. I've also, for this song, referencing World Burn from Mean Girls the Musical. And we use reference tracks for primarily two things. One, to be able to compare our mix and master to that of a commercially viable song. We don't have to be one for one, but it gives us a general ballpark of how we want things to sound and feel. It also, especially in the mastering stage, helps give us some numerical values to work towards when it comes down to how we want our master to be. So when I say numerical values, there's three major numerical values that matter in the mastering process. I'll put the official definitions on screen. So it seems that the stress of the deadline is kind of getting to me, because the next minute of that recording made absolutely no sense. What I was trying to say was that we can take these tracks and as references and find out some information that we can use when mastering our own tracks. Now, there's two pieces of information primarily. That is the peak, which is the maximum volume the song is hitting, and the LUFS, which is the perceived loudness, taking into account human perception of loudness. Regarding the Fletcher-Munson curve and things like that, and that's just a standardised numerical value that we use as musicians, in radio, etc., to just help when it comes down to things like mastering audio. And when it comes down to this song, taking both of my reference tracks, the averages were a 0 peak, a negative 8.4 LU range, and a negative 8.05 LUFS, which, you know, sounds like random numbers, but it does mean that I'm going to work for this song. I'm going to try and go for a negative 8 LUFS, a 9 LU range, and I'm not going to try and peak at 0 because there's a huge risk of clipping, so I'm going to try and peak at about negative 0.3 instead, just to play it safe. So when it comes to mastering, there are three major plugins you need. There's a couple more things you can do, but the basis and the foundation is in three plugins. They are EQ, compression, and limiting. Now, I've explained what EQ and compression are before, so I'm just going to jump in quick. I did actually forget to tell you what EQ and compression are. I'll just give you a really basic. EQ is our ability as producers to manipulate the frequency response of a piece of audio. Now, that can be done by cutting frequencies, boosting frequencies. There are so many things we can do with EQ. It is really the foundation of mixing and mastering, for that matter. And compression is the process of manipulating the dynamic range. Basically, we can make loud bits quiet, quiet bits louder, and there's a plethora of things to do with that. Again, it's the foundation of mixing. So let's get back to where I was at. But limiting is basically a brick wall compressor. It stops anything above a certain threshold from going there, and then it will boost it to another threshold, which we call the ceiling. And in this case, we're going to be making that ceiling negative 0.3 dB. So for this process, I'm going to be using Ozone Pro's mastering suite by iZotope, and this has an EQ on it, a compressor which they call Dynamics for mastering, and my maximizer, which is the name they use for limiting. Now, I'm specifically using Ozone because it's quite intuitive. I can do a lot of things in this that I might need other plugins for, like volume control, etc. It also has a really great bypass and gain match mechanic, where instead of having to turn everything up and down to match the gain, I can just hit the gain match, and then when I bypass, all the effects go off, but the volume stays the same. We do that because there's often a situation where, to our ears, the human ears, loud sounds better than when it's quieter. There's a lot more complexity surrounding that, so it's just a great way of doing that easily. Throughout this master process, my absolute foundation is going to be a slight boost at the presence, a really light compressor, and then obviously my maximizer is going to be ceiling negative 0.3, and we'll be editing the threshold, which I'll get to in a second. So you might be wondering, why have I split up this master into two separate sections? So this master probably wasn't as dynamic as I would like it to be. None of the mixes actually are from this project, and I guess that's a lesson learned at the end of the day. And so in order to make it sound even more dynamic in the master, I'm going to be doing something known as riding the threshold, which is basically I'm going to be automating the threshold in the song so that the louder parts are hitting the threshold harder and the quieter parts are hitting it less. And this is really important just to add that dynamic range, add that flow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go away and I'm going to ride the threshold, and then I'll come back when I have -8 LUFS and a ride, and then we'll work backwards through the EQs and the sections so we can get the best master possible. So I'll see you in a minute. So sadly the recording regarding the live mastering just was a bit weird and didn't work very well. So I'm going to sort of show you what I did the mastering sort of in hindsight in general. So you can see that there's far more cuts here. One of the things you have to do when we're mastering is, as I am riding the threshold, each section is going to be louder, and so there's going to be different kinds of EQ needed for each section. So I split up each of my sections that are going to be at different volumes so I could edit them separately. For example, the solo here had a little bit more presence in it because there was no vocal, I wanted it to be pulled more forward. And here the verse didn't have tons of body, so I added a bit more there. Here is what I did to the threshold. So the loudest part is the solo with the chorus before and the final chorus being just quieter than that. I did want to actually have this clapping section in the middle, in the bridge, be slightly quieter than the rest, which is why it's been cut out and moved up like that. Now other than that, that's actually the master. I did this whole thing, and what I did is I listened to the song over and over and over again and waited until this number here said -8 or close to. I think this is actually like -7.8 or something rather than -8, but in that rough ballpark. And I made edits to the volume, made edits to the automation, made edits to the EQ where necessary. There wasn't actually tons of EQ needed here because when I checked out my tonal balance, which basically shows me the frequency response in regards to each other, so the balance of the mix, actually it was really good throughout, and there wasn't many changes that I really needed to make. And that's it, that's the master done. I'm really sad I couldn't show you the whole thing live, but it's a really simple process. Mastering a good mix takes about half an hour, 45 minutes. It's not an overly complex thing, but it is a very fun thing. And so yeah, I'll see you in a bit. So that's it. All of the tracks are now mastered. You can see here all of them have been placed into a Logic file, and this is what master tracks sort of look like. It's maybe not what they should look like, but you can see the connection to their reference tracks and what I've tried to do and have so much dynamic range, and it works. That threshold riding really, really worked. So that's that. I'm done. All the music's done, and tonight I will be handing in all 5 of these songs, along with a 5,000 word write-up, a reference list, a series of blog posts, and a business website. And that will go in as part of my dissertation. I will then at the end of this month have some meetings surrounding it, and then by the end of September, early October, I'll have my final grade and I'll be able to know what I got for my masters. So I wanted to just thank everybody who has joined me on this journey. Thank you for watching, thank you for taking part in this. At some point, hopefully, this musical will be released. I'm not sure when and I'm not sure how, but I really hope to release it at some point. So follow me on social media and I will announce it on there when it does happen. I am hoping to continue vlogging. I've really, really enjoyed it. I'll see where life takes me and how I can fit it in around that stuff. At the moment, I've not got anything lined up. Maybe when something lines up, I'll take you through my life as a producer or whatever I'm doing at that time. So yeah, once again, thank you for watching. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And I'll see you soon. Peace out.